Andrew, it's good to have you on Founders Unmasked.
It's great to be here.
Now, you're a third generation entrepreneur. Have I got that right?
Probably longer, but that's what I can track. Yeah.
What do you think is in your family's traits that where like what is the founder trait? What's driven everyone to be an entrepreneur, including you?
Uh, Love of pain, I guess, is one thing maybe in our blood.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. It's my my dad came from a family of farmers, generations of farmers, and I most of we've been here a long time in the United States, and so people who came 100, 200 years ago, they were farmers. And there's
What year
something
do you
about
know what year your family arrived in the United States?
early, at least my mom's side of the family was early 1800s. My dad's was around that time or likely before that.
Wow.
And there's something about farming that, you reap what you sow, and
Hmm.
there's just a nature to it of just being an entrepreneur. You gotta get up, you gotta go create. And so I think that's by the time the reason I said three generations is by the time it got to my dad's dad, he passed away before I was born. But he started his own veterinarian clinic, so taking care of farm animals, and had his own clinics. My dad did several different types of ventures throughout his, he had card shops, he did sales, he's been in and out of different businesses. He's always gone back to doing his own thing. And then when I got out of college and became a builder, I started the exact same trend. My wife used to say, "You're doing exactly what your dad did." My mom would say the same thing, like, "You're doing exactly the same thing." So why we do it, I think it's this, I don't know, it's hard to pinpoint, but I think it's the idea that you want to, not that you can be in control of everything, but you want to have more control of what it is you do. And um,
Hmm.
yeah,
It sounds like you want to have control over what your output or impact is.
I think so. It's also just waking up and knowing you're working on something that you care about.
Okay. And when they were saying you were doing exactly what your dad did, is there any specific thing that you were doing? Would they
It
refer to?
was,
What did they
yeah,
say?
the trigger moment for that was I would be working for somebody for, pretty good length of time, more so than my millennial peers. I'd be with somebody for 3 to 5 years, and I would say, I'm really just tired of this.
Mm,
I think I'm going to go do my own thing again
mm,
and go start a remodeling business. Or I couldn't get out of that cycle of like doing home remodeling. I was kind of stuck, but I knew I wanted to do my own thing. And and so they would say, you sound like your dad right now. You sound like this is what your dad would do. You just get tired of working for somebody or doing the same thing.
and was it tired of working for someone or doing the same thing or both? Like, what do you think what makes you tired?
Yeah, for me, it was never really doing the same thing because I was a builder, so every project was different.
Mm,
And I I don't think it so I don't think it was really doing the same thing. Now there were aspects, I guess you could say, that were the same job to job. You'd see sort of the same problems. It wasn't necessarily like I want to be on top of a company. I think it literally is, it's something about I want to be able to create what I do and wake up every day knowing that what I'm doing is because I helped in the creation side of it. And so, I didn't, it's easy to look back in retrospect and see that, but at the time I was always pinpointing something negative about the company I was working for, the jobs and I was doing very well at those jobs. Like I was very valued at the company. My jobs were very profitable, but I couldn't buy into the culture the way I needed to really be successful there. Especially if the stronger the culture at the company, the harder time I had.
wow. Why do you think that is? And when you say stronger, do you want to define what you mean by stronger before you answer that? That would be helpful. Like, what's stronger culture mean to you at a company?
The more the strength, I guess, could be determined by a few things, but definitely it was very explicit. It had gotten to a point of where they were able to articulate it very well.
The rituals were established,
The rituals were established.
right?
The personas that would be hired were, I mean, these were very well, these were optimized companies. Like they were very successful companies, some of the largest builders in the country. Um, I think I admired them too. A lot of it, like, how did they do that? I think it was a lot of curiosity, like how did they get to this point? And just there's a lot of I did have a lot of admiration for the founders of the company. The first company I worked for, the founders weren't running the company. The second company I worked for, a similar size, very large organization, they had grown very quickly over 25 years. The founders were still operating it, and it was just like, how did they do this? And part of me always thought I could do that. And I'd say my ambitions have changed over the years, but
Right.
the idea of creating something, it wasn't my culture, I think. And the stronger the culture it was, the more it was obvious to me that someone else built this.
That's interesting. It sounds like what you're saying is it was like a reminder that you could do it and that it can be done, and it would just gnaw at you and then set you off on this stream of an entrepreneurial venture to see if you could do it. Is that right?
I think so. I would see people climb to the top of climb the ranks in the organization. And my rationale, and I think this is still true, I would rather create something a fraction the size of that, but actually create it than climb to the ranks of something already created that I had
Right.
little input in the creation of.
And do you think it's the things that you like to create are your own rituals? Like, is that really what you're looking to do?
I've never thought of it that way,
Hmm.
but it, I guess the rituals did bother me. The stronger the rituals.
Hmm.
I,
Why did they bother you?
rituals in general don't bother me. I do have, I am more of a religious person than most, and I observe tradition. I appreciate rituals that go along with tradition. They're incredibly centering. I think I don't want to get too philosophical on this, but when I think I know, there's a sense of like these are um idolatrous in a way. Like you see a level of buy-in to the rituals that's just not, it's not deserving, like the level of
Hmm.
commitment to these rituals from the company. And I think that rubbed me the wrong way. And it the buy-in that was required to be successful was more than just my job performance. Because my jobs were very successful. They were very high performing jobs, margin in terms of the margins they would produce. But to be successful in that environment, you needed to really commit. And I understand why. I just knew it wasn't for me.
Why do you think they needed to commit?
Why do people need to commit to the culture in the way that
Yeah, you said you understand why. What did you understand about why they needed to do it? You didn't believe in it, but you understood why. What
I
did
think
you
I
understand
I,
about it?
I think I implicitly understood why, because I could see it. I could see the the efficiency of conversations, the shared understanding.
Mm,
Um, some cultures might be different. It might be you can bring a different different viewpoints, different approaches, less buy-in. For this type of organization that I'm specifically thinking of, it was a very organized, optimized. Um, there wasn't a ton of room for disagreement. So maybe there's maybe we're getting at something else now.
Mm. You couldn't disagree. You couldn't craft the rituals. Um,
There wasn't a space to create. There wasn't a space to really create something new. They actually did start to place me on these sort of jobs that would come out of the blue, these projects that were unique that they'd never done before.
mm,
They'd say, let's give that to Andrew. And because there's a lot of like
abstractness of it, abstraction. Yeah.
abstraction, like there wasn't so process
More
oriented,
risk.
more risk. Um,
Right.
and I did very well with those projects, and they could figure
Mm,
out, is this
yeah.
something we could turn into something?
Right. It just sounds to me like you didn't fit in, but they actually knew how to use you.
Yeah, it's a great company. I often said, and I told my boss when I left to go start Mathtrack with Kevin. I said, if I wasn't this way, I'd probably work for you forever.
What'd they say when you said that?
He says, I know.
Did you describe what way you think you are?
I what worked for them was they had an unbelievable incentive structure that most companies in that space did not have. Like project managers directly share into the profits of the project versus like,
Mm-hmm.
so you could directly, so the more projects you took on, the more
Right.
success you could have, right? More incentives. Like
Makes
that
sense.
project managers were making more in that company than most executives. Like it was, they really figured out an interesting model. I wasn't, that scheme didn't motivate me. And that was a challenge.
You
Like
were
how,
motivated by financial incentives. It sounds like you were motivated by the more difficult projects, the uncharted territory.
the uncharted territory,
But they recognize that though, right?
yeah, they did. And they knew I was doing things on the side.
Good on them. So, you,
Yeah.
you realize that you're not a fit even for the best people that are great at it, even though you respect what they build. It sounds like,
Yeah,
and they respect you.
I thought the first company I worked for, it was a them problem.
Yeah,
I worked for the next company, realized it's a me problem.
right. So let's talk about this me problem. What is it? What's the trait? What's the Andrew Salmon founder trait? And then I want to go back to your father and your grandfather about what you admire about them being entrepreneurs. But what is the entrepreneurial trait here that you keep saying that, if I wasn't the way I am, almost like it's something you can't ignore. It's so ingrained that you can't even say no to it, even if you're in an extremely lucrative and safe environment where people fundamentally understand your ability to operate in a very risky circumstance for their business, but still let you do it anyway.
I am, I've come to learn I'm extremely intrinsically motivated.
Right. Is there one word that describes that motivation? Or how would you package it? If you were to say, how am I motivated? I am motivated by boom.
Purpose driven.
So there is nothing more valuable to you than purpose.
I think so.
Right. Where does that come from? Who taught you about the importance of purpose?
I mean, the easy answer is I could say it came from God, but it's
It could come from
not,
God.
it could come from God.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a lot of people in my shoes would say. I think there's a faith element. I think every person does have a purpose and calling.
Right.
I truly fundamentally believe that.
Mm.
And it's how well are we able to ignore that?
Well, it's taken you a while to believe it because you had to go through the cycle of being at the top of your game and having an easy life presented to you, but you still took the other pill.
It was 2020,
Mm.
and I actually had just had one of the most successful projects at that company. And by the way, if I had stayed there, most of my peers there are now running offices around the country. Like they've got their own companies within the company. They've been very successful. The it was 2020, and I just had one of my most successful projects,
Mm,
and Kevin was, uh, my co-founder, Kevin, for those
mhm,
listening that don't know Kevin. He was going through a pivot, trying to figure out what to do next. This is the middle of COVID. I just had my second child.
mhm.
So middle of COVID, I haven't, I have a good paying job. It's safe. There's lots of incentives attached. I can see the path before me, and yet I decided to jump ship and go do this thing with Kevin.
Mm.
And part of it's like, what was your wife thinking? I think she had seen me make things work enough before that she trusted I would figure it out. But yeah, it's I could have had a really good path through them, but I think what I learned in all this is if I'm not really passionate about the work, I won't last. Like if
Okay,
I don't feel like it's what I'm supposed to be doing, I just won't make it.
right. And do you think that trait of purpose you witnessed with your grandfather and father as they went on the entrepreneurial journey? Like what did they give you? As now you have that reflection. Did they give you anything?
Yeah, it's funny. My dad, he was pretty hard on me. Um, I was the oldest of five,
Hmm.
and he made sure I worked from an early age. As soon as I could work, he made sure I worked. So I learned about hard work really early on. I He always really emphasized the guy on the magazine, the entrepreneur, and I used to blow those magazines off because I really didn't care about the guy on the magazine.
What do you mean by the guy on the magazine?
The the Ink the Ink magazine.
Oh, right. So like the business profiles of CEOs and entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
Interesting. When did he start doing that to you? What
I
age?
think the earliest I remember it was in high school. Uh, he would put him in my room, show him. He'd tell me about the guy on the magazine, and um, I just actually really didn't care.
Mm,
Just really did not care.
mm,
Uh, but I think he was trying to. I don't think he really cared either, to be honest. I don't think he really does. I He cared enough to have the magazine, but I think he was trying to engage me, get me to engage because
mhm,
I was so disengaged in school and everything else.
mhm,
Um, but I think the idea of hard work, working at an early age, mowing yards when I'm little,
mhm,
9, 10 years old, having people pay me for cash.
mhm,
When you work a lot of jobs and you have an experience where I think it just takes one experience working where it's like I created that, I did that job, I did the service, I told them how much to pay me, they paid me.
mhm,
If you just do that a few times, you figure out like I could actually, like I think I should be doing this.
mm. So if you had to name one gift your father gave you for your entrepreneurial journey, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean I always go back to it's just the idea of hard work because it is hard work,
Mm. It sounds like
and
he was showing you the result. He was trying to get you to see the result
the result of the hard work with the
of who you could be.
could be. Yeah.
I find it really interesting that he kept showing you that image. That doesn't sound like someone that doesn't care. That just sounds like someone that doesn't know how to communicate with a disagreeable boy. But he did it way more than one time, didn't he?
Yeah, I never questioned my dad cared about me. Like there was never any question. I think
No, about you being an entrepreneur, it's very different. That's what I'm talking
yeah,
about.
yeah, the expression of that might have
Seems like
been
he keeps trying to nudge you towards don't be employed, be one of these guys.
yeah, he still to this day says, if I would have done this, if I would have done that,
Mm,
so and so worked at UPS and now they're retired and it's like and it's always easy to look back and say those things, but it's just like, yeah, but you wouldn't have. Like even if you could go back and do it, you just wouldn't have been able to do it. You just
Right.
wouldn't have able to stick it out. Could be ADD. I mean, it's just like we just can't stay like the same
Oh,
task.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, it sounds like he still hasn't accepted his own entrepreneurial archetype, or
I
maybe
think
maybe regrets it, which is also something too.
I think the piece that's missing for a lot of generations of entrepreneurs, just like everything else today, there's
Good.
a lot more resources available and support.
Right. Okay. That's a good call.
That's what I recognize. I mean, this counterpart program, he didn't
Well,
have that.
not as lonely.
It's certainly not as lonely.
Mm.
There's just, if I were in his shoes, I don't think I would be as far as I've gotten,
Oh.
going up. It's just, I think I've had a lot more support
Mm.
in this journey than entrepreneurs.
Maybe he's giving you that was the gift. Yeah. You haven't done this entrepreneurial journey alone. You're not choosing to either, by the way.
Mhm.
What about your grandfather? Is there one gift that he gave you as an entrepreneur?
I didn't, I didn't get to meet him. He died before I was born.
Right.
Um, in our family, the legends are all about hard work, right? It's
Okay. Yeah.
the legends.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's. I think there's especially for men, even still today, it's this like, what is my value? And I think so much of it gets placed in the economic side of things. I think it's just how people they remember. So the story always was he had the flu, 104-degree fever, and he's working the railroads. And it's like, I know what I'm doing. I got 104-degree fever. I'm laid in bed with a blanket. And I think part of it is it was the way of saying like he was a really committed man. He was doing hard work. He was sacrificing for the family. Like I think that was a part of it. So I think it's two-sided. It's like this is an example of the level he went to for the family. And then the other side of it is he was driven. Like he
Mm,
was purpose driven. He felt like he needed to be there. It's
mm,
never quite articulated, but it's like you can kind of see in the context of how they're talking about it.
mm.
Sacrifice for the family, also driven, focused, purpose driven. Like you don't really want a man that has no direction.
Sure. So
And so
do you think the gift was drive or the idea that you create for those around you, which is the two things you just mentioned?
I think it's both. I think it's the idea that you can create the hardest part, but also the drive to be able to, because it requires a ton of persistence.
Right. Which one resonates with you more?
Definitely persistence. I
Drive.
drive. Yeah, it's
Right.
will not quit. And that's
Okay.
it's just like we will not quit.
So is that what made you good at construction projects, which are extraordinarily hard to make profitable? Like what made you good at that?
I would not quit. I would get to the so in construction, when you're building a large commercial building, you get to like you usually have two types of builders. Those that are good at starting projects, but they have to hand off,
Hmm.
and those that are good at coming in and finishing the project off.
Right.
Was I was a bit rare in the sense that I could do the whole life cycle of a project, and
Mm,
I would start the projects, get them set up really well, and then by the end of it, you never think you're going to make it. You never think there's enough time, and then it's rallying at the end of the project, like you're really almost there, but it's when you feel the furthest away,
right.
and it's just literally driving and persistence, and I learned that I really learned that through building. I think I learned it a bit through sports, but it really came out in building, being
Mm,
able to just push and finish a job and get it done.
mm,
And you have to decide. Like there's actually a moment in a project. It's usually you're about 80% there.
Mm,
And it's been a slog. There's been a lot of weather delays. There's been a lot of fights and issues, and you may even have like some legal issues with some of your contractors at this point. Like that's usually about where you're at.
mm.
You have to decide, are we going to finish?
Hmm.
You actually explicitly have to make that decision. And a lot of guys would not. They would just kind of like drag it out. And I had to learn, and I learned through the projects that we're going to finish this job. Like we're going to get it done. And this is the worst part of the project, but we have to get it done.
Mm.
It's going to be way worse if we don't. And number two, our names are on this. Like,
Right. That's fascinating. So what you're saying is that all these projects would come to this common friction point, and the way the industry handles it is they just bring in a different project manager to finish the job,
yeah, they get
almost.
tired, so you bring them in. Yeah.
And so you almost sort of like two different project managers. You have a startup one and a closer, and you just recognize that you had to sort of lay the line down. What do you think gave you that unfair advantage to do that when no one else could? Does it come from the drive that you were just mentioning? Does it come from it was just a ritual to you? You love your own rituals. Seemed to be the one that you did, no one else did. Is it what? No, I'm serious. It's a big
Yeah.
deal. Did it come from the fact that it was just the abstract part of the project and that's what your strength was? Like, what do you think made your ability to do that? Because the way you're talking about it with conviction is you can see that you really did. You can tell that you can always tell when someone's genuinely saying what they did.
I I took a very specific example.
Okay.
If I was 24 and it was a 20-story building, and I remember I had a whole senior staff,
Mm,
and the developer was there, and we're towards the end of the project, and he could have talked to any of the senior staff about getting that. He came up and asked me and was asking me all the questions about getting the building done. And I'm like, this is the second building I've built, but here's what I think like needs to happen and what we're going to do. We've got the fire marshal coming. We're about to get the power turned on to the building. Like we're weatherproofing. So like, we're not going to have the water issues we've had. And he just stopped going to the senior staff and he just started coming directly to me as a 24-year-old. This is a $100 million project. There's a lot on the line for these developers, and they're trusting me as a 24-year-old. And I remember thinking at the time, like, I respect this guy. He's the customer. I don't like everything about him, but I want to be the guy that finishes. And I want to be the guy that is just known for he powers through. Like, because everything gets to that point where you can there's always an opportunity to quit.
yeah.
You can always quit, no matter what. I mean, your military background. How
But
many missions you quit? And then you said we're
only
gonna.
one I've only quit once in my whole life. It really unraveled everything. I but just on this fact for a second, you said something very different before you said back into your mode of persistence. You sort of highlighted through examples that things weren't problems anymore. Like you said, like you already could see that these things weren't problems. So the reason he came to you sounds like it wasn't your persistence, it was actually your ability to zoom out
Hmm.
when no one else could. Then the persistence kicked in, by the way. Like, but a lot of people have persistence. Like you could, but that ability to zoom out, that's why you got their trust. It was like you'd already weighed up what was important and what wasn't important. So therefore, you could spend the time on the things that needed to be done. Have you realized that?
No, in that way, no.
Mm. An ability to zoom out is back to my sort of point, which I said was do less. You know, things that aren't problems, you could always things that are problems, you could just be like, that's not a problem, and then it ceases to be one. One of the great traits of a leader is the ability to zoom out and actually highlight what the main problem is. Another one is that there is only ever one priority until that one's finished. Then it's the next priority. There's only ever one priority. There's never a list of priorities. It sounds like that's part of your secret sauce.
Yeah, and some of it's um I like to say people say they were
What
classically trained. Yeah, go ahead.
what's stopping you recognize that your ability to zoom out is actually
I don't know if there's anything stopping me from recognizing that. I think maybe it's just having it pointed out. Probably just having it pointed out. Some of this is, I was classically trained as a project manager, and what that means is
Mm.
there is some logic to, what they call the critical path. Not everything is equally as important right now. There's a million things happening on this project, but this is the one that if it doesn't happen today and get done, the end date
Yeah.
moves.
Yeah, you can blame it on the theory as much as you want, but you still voiced up and zoomed out, didn't you?
Mhm.
And everyone else in that room that had been classically trained also could have done it. And every developer that also knows what project managers do and how they're trained also could have done it. But they trusted a 24-year-old.
Yeah, it's just I've always sought to understand
Mm-hmm.
what's fundamental.
Sometimes it's just you.
What do you mean?
Well, something gave you the courage just to do it. And courage is rare.
Yeah, if I'm thinking back to those scenarios, there was a lot of people that could have stepped up and didn't.
Right. How many times do you think you showed courage when you probably weren't expected to? Was it like every time? Hmm.
Probably most times when there, yeah, and I hate myself for it sometimes because like I know I'm about to do it, and I
Right.
know because you're
And,
going to take it on,
right.
and
Yeah. No. Like, yeah. Yeah. You
and
don't
and,
take
and part of my
you don't
journey
take on the dragon if you don't know you can't. You probably know you might die, but you also know you could kill it.
well, I found my limits over the years.
Right.
I used to just take on more and more dragons, and so now I'm being careful about which dragons I take on.
Right. So how does a project manager that gets good at a very young age in construction, that's entrepreneurial, that understands rituals and how people work together, that has this trait of zooming out, that wants to do things for a purpose, end up working with a mathematics professor to teach people how to get better at teaching people that are teaching math? Like how did that happen? How did you find purpose at Mathtrack?
Yeah, it might be useful to say how I even met Kevin and
Let's start with the purpose, then we go back to Kevin.
how did I find purpose at
Yeah,
Mathtrack?
yeah, definitely. That's what I'm really interested in.
I I think it follows this theme that we were just talking about of taking ownership of something and now it's yours and stepping into something. I came across with Kevin, I came across the problem that is very hard and nobody's really stepping in to try to solve. And for some reason, I thought, oh, it needs me and Kevin, but definitely needs my skill sets to help solve this. Like I think I can figure out this problem.
What dragon do you think you have to conquer as you think about Mathtrack's journey? What's the one critical dragon
I think our awareness of the dragon keeps changing as we peel back the onion.
for you?
I,
Just you, not Kevin. Just
or
you.
for me personally, the dragon.
This is about you.
I think the one that I've been fighting, I have to get over the fact that while I'm a founder, I wasn't a teacher, and we're solving a teaching problem, and so I've had a hard time. It's not natural for me to. It's valuable as a founder to speak from experience of a problem. Like I was a teacher, or I was in a
Right?
school or that. That's the dragon I've had to learn to overcome, and I'm still overcoming. And the way I've done that is by becoming an expert on the problem.
Yeah.
And
Why do you think you always go back to the theory of why things are successful versus recognizing the reality of the situation?
give me an example of something that I can work from.
Well, you're talking about you wanted to now know the most about the problem, right? And that
Mm.
you would I asked you what's your dragon, and your dragon is I got to get over that I'm not a teacher. That's
Mm.
just that's an odd thing to assess strategically for a business to be successful. Whereas the reality of the situation is you have a subject matter expertise that knows nothing about building things. And we just did 30 minutes on why you're great at building things.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality. The other reality is this is a really complex, abstract problem. And it's probably
Mm-hmm.
one of the most abstract that's been brought to you.
Yeah.
And you ran straight at it.
Right.
And you did it with courage.
Yeah.
So what I don't want you to answer it from this is the theory, this is where I'm at, this is a business conversation. I want you to answer it from you're attracted to an abstract problem, you're courageous, you can see value in Kevin, you're a builder. He's not a builder. He's an inventor.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a builder.
Right.
Right. And he recognizes that in you, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what does that guy think his dragon is? Not I'm trying to make sense of what the problem is. The textbook Andrew. I don't care about textbook Andrew. I care about builder Andrew.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, you'll have to do a podcast with Kevin and get him to answer that one.
I will. Don't worry. You're going first. Don't you think that's interesting?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's courage.
Yeah, it is courage.
I don't know, Tom. That's a really interesting question. I don't have a
Well,
I don't have a good answer.
why don't I ask it in a really specific way that's reflective of your experience? What's the critical path right now that Mathtrack needs to take to get us to its next milestone of success? And what's the one obstacle in that path that you're taking out? Because that's your dragon right now.
Yeah. The dragon right now that's completely front of mind for now I can talk from the business perspective. That's actually easier for me to talk about dragons than maybe me.
Yeah.
The it's this problem is complicated for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons it's complicated, we've already solved for. Like we've figured out how to develop a solution that can take people who have no education background and make them effective while they're on the job. Hard problem in and of itself. We figured that out. The problem we didn't solve for over that period of time was who is the customer that will buy that, find the most value in that solution, and how do they interface with that solution? The districts have this teacher pipeline problem. It's broken. They historically have not had to pay for it. It's been handled at the college level, but now the districts have to solve for it. And so the dragon we have to figure out right now is how do we, like, they recognize it. How do we help them figure out how to pay for it with the limited resources they have? They already have stretched budgets. Now they have to pay for this, the most fundamental part of their schools, which is teachers. They have to pay for them to get prepared. How do we help them make it make sense? And that's the unlock I see for our business, that when we figure out the business model that makes sense for us, for districts, for teachers, that's the thing that will enable us to get to the next milestone and beyond. And in some ways, it's actually an easier problem than what we've had to solve for to date. But nothing's been easy.
Right. So it sounds like if I was to say back what you were saying to confirm what I hear is that your problem now is the business model.
That's right.
Right. Very interesting. And you're in the business of changing human behavior at a really simple level. That's what we're trying to achieve. I wonder, have you ever heard of the concept of an elder before?
Of an elder?
The term elder. Yeah.
Of course, but how are you?
How would you define an elder?
Someone wise,
Someone wise.
someone wise, someone
Mm.
guiding, a guiding force.
Right. A guiding force. Now, in your mind, is that someone that's been around a long time, or is that just a job?
Yeah, on the surface, someone who's been around for long enough
Yeah.
to be able to.
everyone
capitalism.
get everyone gets the term wrong. When you grew up in a tribal environment, those that are selected to be elders are very much almost selected to do it when they go through their challenges to become a male or a female within the tribe. And they have something called timespan, which is the ability to zoom out and see ahead. And one of the main jobs that the tribes do to survive is they leverage the elders to design and define the rituals that allow their culture to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you think about it from a really simple perspective, your family set up and founded a village, right?
Mm-hmm.
They had to design a whole group of people living together. And you think about one of the things that really annoyed you when you were the most successful, which was you liked it and respected it, but you didn't believe in it because it wasn't yours. And then we think about where you were most successful in the projects, which is you've even defined the ritual of this decision point needs to happen. And this, whether or not, like, that's not in theory, you just made that up. And then you attracted people to you, and you became a guiding force for a developer at 24 years old. And then we go into this problem that's the most abstract problem. And you do it because you're courageous, but it is the most abstract problem. And now you're saying that the business model needs to be formed. If you think about all those together, and if you were just to go from I'm Andrew, founder, builder, to I'm actually the elder, which is the guiding force, don't you think that's a much better articulation of who you really are?
I'd like to be seen that way. See if I can get you talked about at the beginning, the getting your family, those around you. Because right now I am Andrew the builder,
You
right?
are, only because you're saying that to yourself.
Mhm.
But you were a builder at the highest degree, at the youngest level, and you left, right? So then, as an elder, how do you think you solved the business model problem? Not as a builder. What do you think would happen if you looked at it from a different frame? Just have a think about what's happening with your potential counterpart in that big organization where you've now come back with an opportunity and he's extremely excited to be guided by you. Do you think
Mhm.
that's just because I'm teaching you a tactic, or is that because people will recognize who you are, even if it's subconscious?
Mhm.
Hmm. It's really interesting.
An elder pauses and
If I,
reflects.
yeah, well, it's really interesting when you think about one of the things you said that only an elder would say, which is, maybe my father just didn't have the resources that we have now. No one thinks like that. Elders do, because they recognize how things have changed over time. Wonder what would happen if your role was to become the elder for the problem that you're trying to solve for the market, not even just for the business. And I wonder what would happen if you realize that an elder's main job is to build the rituals into the community around them.
We
And
just had a
I wonder
conversation.
if you just realize that that's exactly what your family have been doing for an extensionally long period of time, and it's what sent them west towards the most abstract problem. And the most abstract problem humans can actually solve, to be really honest with you, is exploration where they turn it into a town. The idea of crafting a village from zero is harder than the startup.
So the element of adventure, I think, is sort of what you're hinting at. It's the call to adventure, and
Yeah, your
I,
family just only elders respond to that call. Maybe knights, but
it's when if in a more articulate way, it's when it stops feeling like an adventure, right? That voice gets further and further away, so you got to go somewhere to hear it.
what do you think is going to stop you from accepting that role?
As the elder,
Yeah.
I don't think that would be a stretch. I think I don't really see myself as a builder anymore. I
Huh.
I'll-
This has been a fast conversation then.
I well I there's times I miss it. I miss the camaraderie on the project when I miss the you can see the progress day after day, the visible signs of progress. And then it's still there. You can go back and I can see the buildings. I like to check to see how well did that thing hold up, that part of the project. Like, did it stand the test of time that we thought it would, because it was a risky part of the project. Um, those are more technical aspects. I think as I think about the role of an elder, we just had a call with a customer, and I like I don't think you're crazy, you know, calling it an elder role. It's a really interesting take. I think in hard spaces like education, people are looking for guidance,
Oh yeah. Well,
and
you only ever find elders where it's the most complex. You don't need guiding if it's easy.
I just met with a superintendent of a district. He's probably 30 years older than I am, and I did an hour-long conversation discovery with him just to tell him that he doesn't have the problem that I was looking for.
Right.
And I said, you don't really have a hair on fire problem that I'm really looking for. You have some opportunistic stuff that could be interesting, but not really hair on fire. And um, long story short, he wants us to put a business model in front of him, because what's holding his vision back is being able to create this academy for kids where they can
Well, and
graduate.
it sounds like he can't tell you what he needs, but he trusts you to tell them where to go. Sounds like an elder to me, man. All right. Well, um, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Um, I
Likewise.
I really hope you accept that your unfair advantage is your ability to zoom out, and that doesn't come from experience, age. It's a core strength of yours. And I think if you were to accept it, you'll drastically improve your outbound, your reach, your impact, and things will get easier. Doesn't mean you won't do hard things. It just means you'll be able to do more of them. But thank you for your time today. I hope you got something out of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go tell my wife I'm a Mathtrack. I'm an elder now, so we can. That's what I do. Tell your family.
I
That's
hope
what.
you do.
Yeah,
I'll be telling people that. I believe it.
it'll definitely create a conversation. We'll put it that way.
I hope it does. That's only because the term, like partnerships, is not the right term.
Right.
People have misconstrued what it means. But what it really means is guiding force. Right.
Well, thanks for having me on, Tom.
No problem.
This was insightful.
Okay, great. Thank you.